The pen trembled in Eleanor Harper's hand as she stared down at the document that would either save her life or ruin it. The black letters swimming across the yellowed paper like ants she could not decipher. It was July of 1885, and the Nevada sun beat down mercilessly on Goldfield, a town that had sprung up around promising gold deposits just 5 years earlier. Eleanor had arrived 3 days ago with nothing but the clothes on her back, a small leather satchel containing her mother's wedding ring, and a desperation that tasted like copper in her mouth. Her father had died 6 months prior in a mining accident back in Colorado, leaving debts that swallowed their homestead whole. Her mother had passed when Eleanor was just a girl, and at 22 years old, she found herself utterly alone in a world that did not favor unattached women. The Silver Spur Saloon was not the finest establishment in Goldfield, but it was the only place hiring. The owner, a corpulent man named Vernon Blackthorn with tobacco-stained teeth and wandering hands, had offered her a position. He called it entertainment, but Eleanor understood the implications even if she could not read the fine print of the contract he had shoved across his cluttered desk. She had never learned to read properly. Her father had been a laborer, moving from town to town, and schooling had been sporadic at best. She could sign her name, recognize a few words, but the dense legal language before her might as well have been written in Chinese. "Just sign it, girl," Blackthorn said from behind his desk, picking at his teeth with a sliver of wood. "You need the work, do you not? Room and board included. You will make good money here." Eleanor's hand moved toward the paper, the pen nib hovering above the signature line. Her stomach churned. She knew, somehow deep in her bones, that signing this document would trap her in ways she could not imagine. But what choice did she have? She had 40 cents to her name. She had not eaten a proper meal in 2 days. The door to Blackthorn's office burst open, and Eleanor jerked back, startled. A tall man filled the doorway, his broad shoulders nearly touching both sides of the frame. He wore dusty trail clothes, a dark brown hat pulled low over his eyes, and a red bandana tied loosely around his throat. A gun belt hung at his hip, well worn but clearly maintained. He had the sun-weathered look of someone who spent more time under open sky than under any roof. "Blackthorn, we need to talk about your account at the general store," the man said, his voice a low rumble like distant thunder. His gaze swept the room and landed on Eleanor, then dropped to the document under her hand. Something shifted in his expression. "Not now, Thorn," Blackthorn growled. "I am conducting business." The man, Thorn, stepped fully into the room despite the dismissal. His eyes, Eleanor noticed, were an unusual shade of gray-green like sage after rain. They fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "What kind of business?" he asked quietly. "None of yours. The girl needs work. I am providing it." Eleanor watched as Thorn's jaw tightened. He moved closer, and she caught the scent of leather and sage and something clean, like wind across open desert. He looked down at the document, his eyes scanning it quickly, then back up to her face. "Can you read this?" he asked her directly, his voice gentler now. Heat flooded Eleanor's cheeks. Shame was a familiar companion, but it still stung. She shook her head, unable to meet his eyes. His hand shot out and caught her wrist, stopping her from signing. His touch was firm but not rough, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "Let me help," he said. "Now you wait just a minute," Blackthorn sputtered, rising from his chair. "You have no right to interfere with my hiring." Thorn did not release Eleanor's wrist. He picked up the document with his free hand and began to read aloud. His voice was steady, clear, and as he spoke, Eleanor felt her blood run cold. The contract bound her to work at the Silver Spur for a period of 5 years. She would receive room and board, but any wages would go toward paying off a debt of $200, the supposed cost of her room, board, and training. She would not be permitted to leave the premises without permission. She would be required to entertain guests in whatever capacity Blackthorn deemed necessary. If she attempted to break the contract, she would owe the full amount plus damages. "It is an indenture contract," Thorn said flatly, dropping the paper back on the desk. "Slavery with fancy words." "It is a legal document," Blackthorn snapped. "And I will thank you to keep your nose out of my affairs, Dalton Thorn." So his full name was Dalton Thorn. Eleanor finally looked up at him, this stranger who had stopped her from making a terrible mistake. His face was angular, with a strong jaw covered in a few days' worth of stubble. A small scar cut through his left eyebrow. He was perhaps 26 or 27, young but with the bearing of someone who had seen hardship and survived it. "She is not signing this," Dalton said. "She needs work, unless you are offering her something better." Blackthorn's smile was oily and knowing. Dalton released Eleanor's wrist and turned to face Blackthorn fully. The air in the room shifted, became charged with something dangerous. Eleanor held her breath. "As a matter of fact," Dalton said slowly, "I am. My ranch needs a cook and housekeeper. Room, board, and $25 a month, no contract necessary. She can leave whenever she wants." Eleanor's head snapped up. "What?" Blackthorn laughed, a wet, unpleasant sound. "Your ranch. That struggling patch of dirt outside town. You can barely keep yourself fed, Thorn. How are you going to pay a salary?" "That is my concern," Dalton replied. His gaze shifted to Eleanor. "What is your name?" "Eleanor Harper," she managed to say. "Miss Harper, I am offering you honest work for honest pay. No strings. I am at the ranch most days from sunup to sundown. I will not bother you, and you can have the spare room in the main house. There is a bolt on the door. If you want the job, it is yours." Eleanor stared at him. It was too good to be true. Men did not simply offer help without expecting something in return. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw no deception there, only a kind of quiet determination. "Why?" she whispered. Something flickered across his face, too quick to name. "Because I have a sister. If she were in trouble, I would hope someone would help her." He paused. "And because nobody should be tricked into signing away their freedom." It was the sincerity in his voice that decided her. Eleanor stood, leaving the pen on Blackthorn's desk. "I accept your offer, Mr. Thorn." Blackthorn's face went purple. "You ungrateful little wretch. You will regret this, both of you." Dalton placed himself between Eleanor and Blackthorn, a human shield. "We are done here, and Blackthorn, you still owe Miller $50 at the general store. Pay it by the end of the week, or I will be back." He gestured for Eleanor to precede him out of the office. She moved quickly, grateful to escape the stifling room and Blackthorn's rage. The saloon's main floor was empty at this early hour, chairs still upturned on tables. Dalton guided her out into the bright afternoon sun. Eleanor blinked, adjusting to the light. The main street of Goldfield was busy with afternoon traffic. Wagons rolled past, kicking up dust. A group of miners headed toward one of the claims on the edge of town. Somewhere, a dog barked. "Do you have belongings?" Dalton asked. "At the boarding house. Just one bag. We will get it." As they walked, Eleanor studied him from the corner of her eye. He moved with an easy confidence, nodding to people they passed but not stopping to chat. Several women watched him with obvious interest, but he seemed oblivious. Eleanor wondered what had possessed him to offer her a job. Was he truly just being kind, or was there some ulterior motive she had not yet uncovered? The boarding house was run by a sharp-eyed widow named Mrs. Carlyle, who took Eleanor's money without comment and watched suspiciously as Eleanor gathered her few things. When they emerged with Eleanor's small bag, Dalton took it from her without asking and carried it to where his horse was tied outside the saloon. The animal was a handsome bay gelding with intelligent eyes. Dalton secured Eleanor's bag behind the saddle, then turned to her. "Have you ridden before?" "Not often," Eleanor admitted. "The ranch is about 3 miles out. We can walk if you prefer, but it will take over an hour in this heat." Eleanor looked at the horse, then at the sun bearing down mercilessly. "I can ride." Dalton mounted first, then extended his hand down to her. Eleanor grasped it and let him pull her up behind him. She settled awkwardly on the horse's back, unsure where to put her hands. "Hold on to me," Dalton said. "Charlie is gentle, but I would rather you not fall off." Tentatively, Eleanor placed her hands on Dalton's waist. Even through his shirt she could feel the solidity of him, the warmth. It felt strange and intimate to be this close to a man she had just met, but she had little choice. Dalton clicked his tongue, and Charlie began to walk. They rode in silence through town and out onto the open land beyond. The landscape was harsh and beautiful. Scrub brush dotted the reddish earth, and mountains rose in the distance, purple and hazy in the heat. The sky stretched endlessly above them, so blue it almost hurt to look at. "Thank you," Eleanor finally said, her voice nearly lost in the sound of hoofbeats, "for what you did back there." "You already thanked me by accepting the job," Dalton replied. "I meant what I said. I need the help. The place has been going to ruin since my sister left." "Where is she now?" "Got married last year. Moved to California with her husband. He is a good man, a teacher. They are happy." There was warmth in Dalton's voice when he spoke of his sister, and Eleanor felt some of her wariness ease. "And your parents?" "Gone. My father died in the war. My mother passed 5 years back from fever." He said it matter-of-factly, but Eleanor heard the old grief underneath. "What about your people? Both gone too?" "My father died in a mining accident, my mother when I was young." "I am sorry." They lapsed into silence again, but it was more comfortable now, a shared understanding of loss. Eleanor watched the landscape roll by and tried not to think too hard about what she was doing, riding off into the desert with a strange man toward an uncertain future. It had to be better than what Blackthorn had been offering. Anything was better than that. The ranch, when it came into view, was modest but well-maintained. A 2-story house with a wide porch sat at the center, flanked by a barn, a stable, and a few other outbuildings. A windmill turned lazily in the breeze, drawing water from deep beneath the earth. Fencing enclosed a paddock where several horses grazed. It was not large or fancy, but it looked like a home. Dalton reined Charlie to a stop near the house and dismounted, then helped Eleanor down. Her legs felt unsteady after the ride, and she stumbled slightly. His hand steadied her, strong and sure. "Come on," he said. "I will show you around." The inside of the house was dim and cool, a relief after the blazing sun. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. The furniture was simple but sturdy. Dust covered most surfaces, and dishes were piled in a basin near the pump. Eleanor could see why he needed help. "Your room is upstairs," Dalton said, leading her up a narrow staircase. "There are 2 bedrooms. I take the one on the left. This one is yours." He opened the door to reveal a small but pleasant room. A bed with an iron frame stood against one wall, covered with a faded quilt. A dresser and washstand completed the furnishings. A window looked out over the front of the property. "There is the bolt I mentioned," Dalton said, pointing to the sturdy metal fixture on the door. "You can lock it from the inside. I will not enter without your permission." Eleanor set her bag on the bed and turned to face him. In the close confines of the room, she was acutely aware of his height, his presence, but his expression remained respectful, almost distant. "The work is not complicated," he continued. Cooking, cleaning, mending when needed. I am usually out with the horses most of the day. I run a small breeding operation, sell to the mines and the army. I can teach you to ride properly if you like. It is useful out here. I will do whatever you need, Eleanor said. Dalton nodded. Get settled. I will be in the barn if you need anything. There are supplies in the kitchen. Fix yourself something to eat. You look half-starved. He left, closing the door behind him. Eleanor stood in the middle of the room, listening to his footsteps retreat down the stairs and out of the house. Then, for the first time in weeks, she let herself truly breathe. She was safe. For now, at least, she was safe. The first week passed in a blur of work and adjustment. Eleanor threw herself into her duties with fierce determination. She scrubbed the house from top to bottom, washed and mended Dalton's clothes, cooked meals that started out simple and grew more ambitious as she reacquainted herself with a well-stocked pantry. Dalton was true to his word. He was polite, respectful, and kept his distance. They ate meals together in companionable silence, and he always thanked her for the food. At night, Eleanor bolted her door and lay in bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, slowly beginning to relax. Dalton was an enigma. He worked harder than any man Eleanor had ever seen, up before dawn and rarely stopping until well after dark. He was patient with his horses, gentle even, talking to them in that low, rumbling voice. He spoke little but observed much. Eleanor often felt his eyes on her, but when she looked up, he would glance away, a faint color rising in his weathered cheeks. She began to notice small kindnesses. Fresh water in her basin each morning before she woke. Wildflowers in a jar on the kitchen table. A new pair of work gloves that fit her hands perfectly, appearing without comment. On the 8th day, Dalton asked if she wanted to learn to ride properly. They spent the evening in the paddock, Dalton teaching her how to mount and dismount, how to hold the reins, how to communicate with the horse through subtle shifts of weight and pressure. He was a patient teacher, never mocking her mistakes, always encouraging. "You are a natural," he said as she successfully guided a gentle mare around the paddock for the 3rd time. Eleanor felt a bloom of pride. "I had a good teacher." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, electric and unspoken. Dalton looked away first, clearing his throat. "That is enough for today. Do not want to tire you out." But Eleanor was not tired. She felt more alive than she had in months, maybe years. The work was hard but satisfying. The desert air was clean in her lungs. And Dalton Thorn was proving to be far more than the rough cowboy she had initially assumed him to be. She began to learn his habits, his preferences. He liked his coffee strong and black. He had a sweet tooth but rarely indulged. He read in the evenings, slowly working through a battered copy of Ivanhoe. When Eleanor mentioned she could not read well, Dalton looked up from his book with surprise. "Would you like to learn?" he asked. Eleanor's heart leaped. "You would teach me, if you want." And so a new routine began. After dinner, after the dishes were washed and put away, they would sit at the kitchen table with the lamp between them, and Dalton would teach Eleanor to read. He started with simple words, patient as she struggled to connect letters to sounds, sounds to meanings. His voice was gentle, never frustrated, always encouraging. Their heads bent close together over the pages, and Eleanor found herself acutely aware of every brush of his hand against hers, every shared breath. "You are doing well," Dalton said one evening as Eleanor successfully read an entire paragraph from a newspaper. His smile was rare and all the more precious for it. "You have a quick mind." "I have a good teacher," Eleanor repeated, and this time when their eyes met, neither looked away quickly. The air between them seemed to thicken. Dalton reached across the table, his hand covering hers. His palm was calloused and warm, and Eleanor's heart began to pound. "Eleanor," he said softly, "I want you to know that you are safe here, always. I would never take advantage, never ask for anything you are not willing to give." "I know," Eleanor whispered. And she did. She trusted this man in a way she had not trusted anyone in a very long time. "But I would be lying if I said I did not feel something," Dalton continued, his gray-green eyes holding hers. "I know you have only been here a short while. I know you might not feel the same, but I needed to be honest with you." Eleanor's breath caught. "You feel something." A corner of his mouth lifted. "Since the moment I walked into Blackthorn's office and saw you trying to be brave even though you were terrified, you have a strength in you, Eleanor Harper, a goodness. And yes, I feel something." Joy, bright and unexpected, flooded through Eleanor. "I feel it too," she admitted. "I was afraid to say anything, afraid you might think I was trying to repay you or that I was just grateful." "Are you just grateful?" Dalton asked, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. "No," Eleanor said firmly. "It is more than that. You are kind and patient and good. You make me feel safe but also challenged. You believe in me. I have never had that before." Dalton stood, still holding her hand, and pulled her gently to her feet. They stood close, the table no longer between them. He lifted his free hand to cup her face, his touch reverent. "May I kiss you?" he asked. "Yes," Eleanor breathed. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Eleanor did not want to pull away. She wanted him, with a certainty that shocked her. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet and full of promise. Eleanor's eyes fluttered closed and she leaned into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart pounding beneath her palms, as fast as her own. The kiss deepened, grew more urgent, and then Dalton pulled back, breathing hard. His eyes were dark with desire but also with restraint. "We should take this slow," he said hoarsely. "I do not want to rush you." Eleanor nodded, though her body hummed with newfound wanting. "Slow is good." But slow proved difficult when every glance felt weighted with meaning. Every accidental touch sent sparks racing across Eleanor's skin. They continued their evening reading lessons, but now Dalton would occasionally press a kiss to her forehead, her temple, her lips. Eleanor grew bolder, reaching for his hand as they walked to the barn, stealing kisses in the shadowed stable. 3 weeks after Eleanor had arrived at the ranch, Dalton asked her to accompany him into town. They needed supplies, he said, but Eleanor suspected there was more to it. She changed into her best dress, the blue calico that had been her mother's, and braided her hair carefully. Dalton's eyes widened when he saw her. "You look beautiful," he said simply. They rode into Goldfield together on Charlie, Eleanor's arms wrapped around Dalton's waist, her cheek resting against his broad back. It felt right, natural, as if she had been doing it all her life. In town, Dalton was attentive and proprietary, his hand at the small of Eleanor's back as they walked from the general store to the post office to the feed and tax shop. People noticed. Eleanor saw the curious glances, heard the whispers. Dalton Thorn, the confirmed bachelor, squiring a woman around town. It would be the talk of Goldfield by nightfall. At the general store they encountered Vernon Blackthorn. He looked Eleanor up and down with undisguised malice. "Well, well," he sneered. "The little fool and her savior. Tell me, Thorn, has she earned her keep yet? Or are you more patient than most men?" Dalton's hand tightened on Eleanor's back, but his voice remained calm. "Watch your mouth, Blackthorn. I am just curious. I offered her good money, good work. She chose a dusty ranch with a man barely keeping his head above water. I wonder what incentives you offered that I did not." Eleanor felt her face flame, but before she could speak, Dalton stepped forward, his body a wall of controlled violence. You offered her slavery, Dalton said quietly, and the very quietness of his voice made it more menacing. You have been running your scheme for years, preying on desperate women. It ends now. If I hear of you trying this again, I will make sure the sheriff knows exactly what kind of contracts you have been drawing up. Blackthorn paled. You have no proof. I have Eleanor's testimony. I have my own eyes since I read that contract. And I am willing to bet if we looked hard enough, we would find other women you have trapped. Dalton leaned in. Leave it alone, Blackthorn. Move on to some other town, some other scheme, but do not try this in Goldfield again. The two men stared at each other for a long, tense moment. Then Blackthorn stepped back, his expression ugly. You will regret this. I doubt that, Dalton said. He turned to Eleanor. Come on, we are done here. As they left the store, Eleanor's hands were shaking. He will cause trouble. Let him try, Dalton said grimly. I meant what I said. He has been getting away with this for too long. They finished their errands in silence, the joy of the day dampened by the encounter. On the ride back to the ranch, Eleanor clung tighter to Dalton, drawing comfort from his solid presence. That night, as they sat together on the porch watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold, Dalton took Eleanor's hand. I am sorry about today, he said. I did not mean for Blackthorn to ruin things. He did not ruin anything, Eleanor assured him. You defended me. You defended all the women he might have hurt. That means everything. Dalton was quiet for a moment, his thumb rubbing absently over her knuckles. Eleanor, I need to tell you something. The ranch is not doing as well as I let on. I have been struggling to make ends meet. The breeding operation is sound, but it takes time to build a reputation. I am barely breaking even most months. Eleanor's heart sank. Are you saying you cannot afford to pay me? No, Dalton said quickly. I will always pay you what I promised, but I want to be honest with you. If you are thinking about a future here with me, you should know what you are getting into. It will not be easy. There will be lean times. Eleanor looked at him, this man who had saved her, taught her, cared for her, who faced his struggles with quiet determination and unwavering integrity. I do not need easy, she said. I need honest, I need good, and I have that with you. Dalton's face softened. You are sure, I am sure. He kissed her then, deep and slow, pouring everything he felt into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dalton rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he whispered. Eleanor's heart stopped, then started again at double speed. What? Marry me, Dalton repeated, pulling back to look into her eyes. I know it has not been long. I know you might want to wait. But Eleanor, I love you. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to teach you to read and learn your favorite foods and hear your laugh when something strikes you funny. Marry me. Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks. Yes, she said, laughing through the tears. Yes, Dalton, I will marry you. I love you too. I think I have loved you since you stopped my hand from signing that terrible contract. Dalton whooped, a rare sound of pure joy, and swept Eleanor into his arms, spinning her around. When he set her down, they were both laughing, giddy with happiness and relief. We will do it properly, Dalton said, cupping her face in his hands. I will get you a ring. We will have a real wedding, invite the whole town if you want. I do not need a big wedding, Eleanor said. I just need you. You will have both, Dalton promised. They married 3 weeks later in the small church at the center of Goldfield. Dalton bought Eleanor a simple gold band from the jeweler, presenting it to her with such nervousness, and hoped that Eleanor had to kiss him right there in the middle of the store. Eleanor wore a new dress, cream-colored with lace at the collar, purchased with her first month's wages. Dalton wore his best suit, looking handsome and slightly uncomfortable in the formal clothes. The ceremony was small but meaningful. A handful of neighbors attended, people who had come to respect Dalton's hard work and quiet integrity. The preacher spoke about commitment and partnership, about facing life's trials together. When Dalton slipped the ring onto Eleanor's finger, his hand was steady, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I love you," he mouthed silently. "I love you too," Eleanor mouthed back. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Dalton kissed Eleanor with a tenderness that made her toes curl. The small congregation applauded, and Eleanor felt a happiness so complete it was almost frightening. They celebrated with a simple meal at the ranch. A few friends came by with food and well wishes. As evening fell and the last guests departed, Dalton and Eleanor finally found themselves alone. Eleanor stood in the kitchen, suddenly nervous. She was a married woman now, Dalton's wife. Tonight would be different from the chaste kisses they had shared. Dalton came up behind her, his arms encircling her waist. "What are you thinking?" he murmured against her hair. "That I am happy," Eleanor said, "and a little nervous." "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for," Dalton said immediately. Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. "I am ready. I want this. I want you. I am just new at all of this." Dalton's smile was gentle. "So am I," he admitted. "We will figure it out together." He kissed her softly, then deeper, his hands tangling in her hair. Eleanor responded eagerly, her own hands exploring the planes of his back, the breadth of his shoulders. When Dalton lifted her in his arms and carried her upstairs, Eleanor felt no fear, only anticipation and love and trust. The night was everything it should be, tender and passionate and full of whispered promises. Dalton was patient and gentle, and Eleanor discovered depths of feeling she had not known existed. When they finally fell asleep, tangled together in the bed that was now theirs, Eleanor felt complete in a way she never had before. The months that followed were not without challenges. A dry spell threatened the water supply, and they had to ration carefully. One of Dalton's best mares fell ill, and they spent 3 sleepless nights nursing her back to health. Money remained tight, every dollar carefully accounted for. But through it all, Eleanor and Dalton faced each challenge as a team. Eleanor proved to have a talent for managing the ranch's finances, carefully tracking expenses and finding ways to economize. Dalton taught her more about the horses, and she discovered she had a gentle hand with the animals. Together, they slowly built the ranch into something more stable, more profitable. Eleanor's reading improved dramatically. She devoured every book and newspaper that came her way, hungry for knowledge. Dalton watched her progress with obvious pride, sometimes just sitting and listening to her read aloud, a soft smile on his face. They talked about everything and nothing. Dalton told her about his childhood, about the father he barely remembered and the mother who had held their family together through sheer force of will. Eleanor shared her own memories, the pain of her mother's early death, the loneliness of a childhood spent moving from place to place. "I never had a real home," Eleanor said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. "Not until now." Dalton squeezed her hand. "This is your home, always." 1 year after their wedding, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, the subtle changes in her body impossible to ignore. When she finally told Dalton, he stared at her for a long moment, then let out a shout of joy that startled the horses in the nearby paddock. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down, concerned he had been too rough. "Are you all right? Is the baby all right? Should you be standing? Sit down, let me get you water." Eleanor laughed at his fussing. "I am fine, we are fine. It is early yet, but yes, Dalton. We are having a baby." Dalton sank to his knees in front of her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his cheek pressed to her still flat stomach. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Dalton became even more protective, trying to take over all of Eleanor's chores until she firmly told him she was pregnant, not made of glass. They prepared the second bedroom as a nursery, painting the walls a cheerful yellow and building a cradle together. In the spring of 1887, Eleanor gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The labor was long and difficult, and Dalton paced the downstairs like a caged animal until the midwife finally called him up to meet his son. When he first held the tiny bundle, tears streamed unashamedly down his face. "He is perfect," Dalton breathed. "Eleanor, he is perfect." They named him James William Thorn after both their fathers. Little James had his mother's dark hair and his father's gray-green eyes. He was a good baby, quick to smile and generally content. Dalton proved to be a devoted father, up at night to walk the floor with his son, changing diapers without complaint, singing lullabies in his deep, rumbling voice. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Word spread about the quality of Dalton's horses, and orders increased. 2 years after James was born, Eleanor found herself pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to a daughter they named Caroline Grace, a tiny, fierce thing with her father's stubborn chin and her mother's determination. Life settled into a rhythm, busy and full but deeply satisfying. Eleanor taught James his letters as Dalton had once taught her. She read to both children every night, instilling in them the love of learning she had discovered so late in her own life. Dalton taught James to ride, to care for the horses, to be gentle and strong in equal measure. Little Caroline toddled after her brother and father, determined not to be left behind. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Dalton presented Eleanor with a gift wrapped in brown paper. She unwrapped it to find a leather-bound journal and a fine pen. "What is this for?" she asked. "For you to write our story," Dalton said. "You learned to read. Now I want you to write. Tell our story so our children and their children will know where they came from." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. She opened the journal to the first blank page, considering. Then she picked up the pen and began to write in careful, practiced script. The pen trembled in my hand as I stared down at a document that would either save my life or ruin it. But then a cowboy stopped my hand and said, "Let me help." He gave me more than help that day. He gave me everything. She looked up at Dalton, who was reading over her shoulder. His arms came around her and he pressed a kiss to her temple. "It is a good start," he said. "It is just the beginning," Eleanor replied, leaning back against him. "We have so much more story to tell," and they did. Years of hard work and love and laughter. They expanded the ranch, hired help as their reputation grew. James grew into a fine young man, serious and hardworking like his father but with his mother's quick mind. Caroline was a firecracker, fearless and clever, equally at home in the stable or with a book in her lap. In time, a third child joined their family, another boy they named Thomas, and then a fourth, a daughter named Margaret. The house that had once echoed with emptiness now rang with noise and chaos and life. Eleanor never forgot where she had come from, the desperation that had nearly led her to sign away her freedom. She made it her mission to help other women in similar situations. She worked with the church to establish a women's aid society, offering assistance to those who were stranded, desperate, or in danger. Dalton supported her fully, their ranch occasionally serving as a temporary refuge. Vernon Blackthorne had left Goldfield not long after Eleanor and Dalton's confrontation, moving on to ply his schemes elsewhere. But the Silver Spur Saloon had been taken over by new owners, a married couple who ran it honestly. Eleanor sometimes saw women who had worked there under Blackthorne, now free and making their own choices. She always made a point to speak to them, to offer help if they needed it. As the years passed, Goldfield changed and evolved. The gold deposits began to play out, and some people moved on to the next boom town. But others, like the Thorns, stayed and built something lasting. Dalton's breeding operation became one of the most respected in Nevada. Eleanor became known as a woman of learning and compassion, someone who could always be counted on to help those in need. On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, their 4 children playing in the yard before them, Eleanor thought about how impossibly far she had come. From a desperate, illiterate woman about to sign away her freedom to this, a life full of love and purpose and family. "What are you thinking?" Dalton asked, his hand warm in hers. "That I am grateful," Eleanor said, "for that day in Blackthorn's office, for you stopping my hand. For every moment since." Dalton brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "I am the grateful one. You made this house a home. You gave me a family. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Eleanor Thorn." "We are the best thing that happened to each other," Eleanor corrected gently. In the yard, James was teaching Caroline to lasso a fence post while Thomas and little Margaret cheered them on. The windmill turned lazily in the evening breeze, and somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied. It was the sound of home, of peace, of a life hard won but deeply cherished. Years continued to unfold in a tapestry of seasons and celebrations, challenges and triumphs. James grew into a talented horseman, taking over more of the day-to-day operations of the ranch as Dalton's hair grayed at the temples. Caroline surprised everyone by developing a passion for medicine after helping the local doctor set her brother's broken arm. She left for medical school back east, one of the first women in their region to do so. Thomas proved to have his father's patient temperament and his mother's love of learning, eventually becoming a teacher. Margaret, the baby, inherited her parents' fierce independence and compassionate hearts, working alongside Eleanor in the Women's Aid Society they had built together. The ranch thrived, expanding its holdings and reputation. Dalton and Eleanor worked side by side through droughts and hard winters, through good years and lean ones. Their partnership, forged in that moment when Dalton had stopped Eleanor's hand from signing a terrible contract, only deepened with time. Eleanor never stopped being grateful for the gift of literacy Dalton had given her. She read voraciously, and true to his suggestion, she wrote. She filled journal after journal with the story of their life together, wanting their children and grandchildren to know not just the facts but the feelings, the love that had sustained them through everything. On their 20th anniversary, Dalton took Eleanor on a trip to San Francisco to visit Caroline, who was completing her medical training there. It was the first time either of them had left Nevada in years, and the city amazed them with its size and bustle. But as impressive as San Francisco was, both were eager to return home to Goldfield, to the ranch and the wide open spaces that had shaped their lives. James married a sweet-natured girl from a neighboring ranch, and soon the house was filled with the sounds of grandchildren. Dalton proved to be an even more indulgent grandfather than he had been a father, often found with a child perched on each knee, telling stories of the old days. Eleanor watched him with their grandchildren and felt her heart swell with a love that seemed to grow larger every year. As they aged, their bodies showing the wear of hard work and harsh climate, their love remained constant. Dalton's hands grew gnarled with arthritis, but they still reached for Eleanor's every morning. Eleanor's dark hair turned silver, but Dalton still told her she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. One evening, as they sat on the porch as they had done thousands of times before, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Dalton turned to Eleanor with unusual solemnity. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Choosing this life. It has been hard sometimes." Eleanor looked at him in genuine surprise. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for a single moment, do you?" "No," Dalton said, his voice rough with emotion. "Never. I just wanted to make sure you felt the same, that I gave you the life you deserved." Eleanor took his weathered face in her hands, looking into eyes that still held the same kindness that had captivated her all those years ago. "You gave me everything, Dalton Thorn. Freedom, love, family, purpose. You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I did not believe in myself. This life, our life, is more than I ever dreamed possible." Dalton kissed her, slow and sweet, a kiss that spoke of decades of love and devotion. When they pulled apart, both had tears in their eyes. "I love you, Eleanor Thorn," Dalton said. "Today, tomorrow, and every day after." "And I love you," Eleanor replied. "Always." As the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, they sat together in comfortable silence, hands intertwined. Around them, the ranch hummed with life. Horses moved in the paddock. From inside the house came the sounds of their family. James and his wife preparing dinner, grandchildren laughing and playing. Eleanor thought about the terrified young woman she had been, pen poised over a contract she could not read, about to make a choice that would have destroyed her. She thought about the cowboy who had stopped her hand and offered her a different path. And she thought about all the years since, every joy and sorrow, every triumph and challenge, all of it woven together into a life of meaning and love. The ranch that Dalton had built and that they had grown together would continue long after they were gone. Their children would carry on their legacy of hard work and integrity. Their grandchildren would grow up knowing they came from people who had faced hardship with courage and met challenges with determination. But more than that, they would know about love. Real love, the kind that chose to show up every day. The kind that taught and protected and supported. The kind that grew deeper and stronger with every passing year. As darkness fell and the desert air cooled, Dalton and Eleanor rose from their chairs and went inside together, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring, knowing that as long as they faced it together, everything would be all right. The story of the woman who could not read the contract and the cowboy who stopped her hand became a legend in their family, told and retold to children and grandchildren. But it was more than just a romantic story. It was a reminder that moments of choice can change the entire course of a life, that kindness matters, that speaking up for those who cannot speak for themselves is always the right choice. And in the end, it was a testament to the power of love, the real kind, the kind that builds homes and families and legacies that last long after we are gone. The kind of love that Eleanor and Dalton had found together and nurtured for a lifetime. A love that began with two simple words from a cowboy to a desperate woman in need of hope. "Let me help." Those 3 words had changed everything, had opened a door to a future neither could have imagined that hot July day in Goldfield, Nevada. And through that door had come a life beyond measure, a love beyond compare, and a happiness that proved, beyond any doubt, that sometimes the best things in life begin with a simple act of kindness from a stranger who becomes everything. Years turned into decades, and the Thorn Ranch became a fixture in Goldfield, as permanent as the mountains rising in the distance. Eleanor and Dalton grew old together gracefully, their love a beacon for everyone who knew them. They celebrated 50 years of marriage surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, the house overflowing with family and laughter and joy. When people asked Eleanor what the secret to their long and happy marriage was, she always gave the same answer. We chose each other every day. Not just once, but every single day. And we never forgot that we were a team, partners in everything. And when they asked Dalton, he would smile that rare, precious smile and say, "I married the bravest woman I ever met. She trusted me when she had no reason to. She built this life with me from nothing. How could I not love her with everything I have?" They lived out their days on the ranch they had built together, surrounded by the family they had created and the love they had nurtured. And when the time came for each of them to pass, they did so peacefully, knowing they had lived fully and loved completely. The journals Eleanor had kept, filled with their story, were passed down through the generations. And every person who read them understood that they had come from something special, something rare and precious. They had come from a love story that began with a hand stopping another hand, with a cowboy who saw a woman in need and chose to help, with a woman who chose trust over fear and found everything she had ever wanted. The house still stands, maintained by descendants who understand its significance. The ranch still operates, breeding fine horses as Dalton once did. And on the porch, in the cool of the evening, you can almost imagine you see them there, two figures sitting close together, hands intertwined, watching the sun set over the Nevada desert, content in the knowledge that they had found in each other everything that mattered. Their love had been tested by hardship and strengthened by challenge. It had weathered every storm and celebrated every joy. And in the end, it had proved that the very best love stories are not the ones that start with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but the ones that begin with simple kindness, that grow through daily choice and commitment, and that endure through a lifetime of choosing each other, over and over again, every single day without fail or hesitation or doubt, building something beautiful and lasting and true.